Hello everyone. Now we will continue with the solution of the exercise on coding. I ask you to compare and to code two manifestos, two sections of the manifesto of the Labour Party and the Conservative Party, both from Britain. And the purpose of the exercise was to understand what kind of foreign policy each party has, what are the points they share, and what are the main differences between them. So the idea was to read the texts, color, and create a potential list of issues. I mentioned here some of them, such as environment, trade, human rights, security could be another one, and highlight the text with different colors and find passages where you can see these ideas or these themes appear in the text. So the exercise is just to compare brief on these two sections. For this, I created one way of doing this is just highlighting right up in the text. Another way is doing an Excel spreadsheet like the one I'm showing now, where you select the text in the source, for example, in the PDF, and establish some codes to it. I created two codes. The first one, for example, here, this is the codes for the Labour Party. I create one spreadsheet for the Labour and another one for the Conservative Party. For example, the first text I select was protect the security of people in the UK. So this is clearly a security subject, and code B a UK. You can create many codes as you want for primary codes and secondary codes. I use two codes here, but I could add another one, for example, code C or code 3. It doesn't matter how the variable is called. And then people, just to understand why they are trying to refer or use some words to refer to some kind of feeling, some kind of national sentiment, etc., etc., etc. So I use two columns here. So I went in the text and select some passages of text that could be representing these codes or these issues, like security. I found, for example, security, diplomacy, human rights, environment, development and cooperation, and trade. Some issues are more prominent in Labour Party manifesto than in the Conservative one. If we compare here, I just will bring the Conservative one. You see that security is also an important subject, but the questions related to trade and economy are much more pronounced here, and human rights are less pronounced when compared to the Labour Party. Okay, so with this first exercise, I just select the texts, and I have a good vision, general view about what is the main topics or the main issues that are being discussed in each manifesto. I can compare them, and I can understand what are the similarities and the differences. I'll just show you some things that we can do. The exercise was to highlight and to understand what are the similarities and the differences, and to understand what kinds of visions or political views they propose or for the British if they become government. So I just open here in our the manifestos, both the labor manifestos and the codes. I created a dictionary here from the label. This is just some operational things in order to show this. The idea is that you can see the generation of is the same as you would done or you have done on paper or on Acrobat, Adobe Reader. I just automatized this in R. So I have my all these phrases or sentences or parts of sentences, and then the related code. I say that, for example, Labour's Party starts with security, then they start with diplomacy. Some things related to diplomacy are also human rights due to Britain's colonial legacy. Human rights is an important part of Labour's foreign policy. They are advocating for expansion of human rights all over the world and through international organizations, while the conservative, as we will see, they are much more nationalist, and their human rights are always related to their national institutions. But you can see that human rights and environment appear a lot when compared to the conservative. Security is a important issue for both labor and conservative, but security is mostly a conservative agenda. So having this kind of presence of security in labor foreign relations section of the manifesto shows us how conservatives were winning the fight over their discourse, because they imposed a stance, the development on labor's manifesto on security, because they pushed it to their opponents. International solidarity, development and cooperation, more human rights and environment. And in the end, you can see some trade. So economy is not a big deal, or at least in the formal manifesto, it does not appear that the economy or UK exports and trade would be, you have a huge protagonism in labor foreign policy. Let's see what happens to conservatives. So I open it here and do the same thing with the conservatives. So in the beginning, they are more diverse, and you have both diplomacy, security, development, international organizations they are commenting on, some trade, but mostly security takes human rights something, development also, and then it ends with a lot of economy. So if we just zoom out, we can see that the issue of security and economy dominate the Conservative Party manifesto. Nonetheless, both parties, they focus on UK's presence also on international organizations, although the Conservative Party's manifesto is much more UK centered than the Labour Party's manifesto. The key to if I had to resume or summarize each party by one or two words, I would say Labours are human rights or post-materialist foreign policy, while the conservatives are the coin and bullet foreign policy. coin because of the economy, and bullet because of security. So this would be the main differentiating aspects of the foreign policy of the two. And we can analyze this further. There's a lot of methods and tools we can use. This first one is the simplest one. I just coded using colors and some issues that I, observing the text, found in the text. But we can use other techniques like a previously defined dictionary. A dictionary is, as you know, an equivalency of terms. For example, if I create a dictionary, what are the terms I think that are related to security? So security can be security, armed force, defense, soldier, terrorism, peace, insecurity, military, peace building, warfare, foreign interference, peacemaking, etc., etc. Human rights, torture, massacre, human rights, humanitarian crisis, rogue states, labor, and so on and so far. Environment, the same, and economy. So I create here in a dictionary one big issue, security, and associate with this issue a lot of specific words or terms that I can use to identify this issue in a text. For example, we have just two small texts, the manifesto from the labor and the manifesto from the conservative. And it is just one section. But imagine if I have 2,000 or 2 million documents. So I would need to use some automated method to analyze these texts. With a dictionary, it's much easier to do so. So I create this dictionary with these elements, and then I can apply this dictionary to the texts and see what happens. The R generates me a new HTML document with each term of the dictionary: security, human rights, foreign relations, environment, highlighted in the words it finds in the document. So you can see that there are a lot of terms in human rights and environment, some on international organization, many related to security and economy, some, environment, some, cooperation, many also, but environment appears much more. So when we look into this way, we can see that in the last part of the labor's manifestos, there is more. There is such as a preoccupation on economy that I was not able to observe in my first attempt to systematize. You can see that there is on the entire document, mostly in the second part, but you can see that there's a lot of pink, and pink here relates to the economy. So in the second half of the manifesto, of the international section, they refer a lot with cooperation and economy. So environment and economy, and human rights and economy. So they are worried about the economy, but they are always associating the economy with other substantive policies as the main driver of the economic policy. So economy comes with human rights, economics comes with cooperation, economic comes with environment protection. So this is nice because it gives us a different look into the same data. You can just look into it, try to do it by yourself, or you can try to apply some pre-thought dictionary and see what patterns emerge. And the nice things about coloring using a dictionary is that you can see this by color. You can see where color appears, one color appears most, where it appears, if it appears in the beginning or in the end of the document. So let's see how the same dictionary work with conservatives. So I have the same dictionary, and I just apply it to the conservatives. Now we can analyze the conservatives, and you can see that security, cooperation, but international organization are present. A lot of security, some human rights, and economy. And the economy is outstanding here, and have an entire chapter on economy. Mostly economy drives the foreign policy, not the reverse. All other policies are subsumed to economic policy, foreign policy. So it's a very different, although economy appears in the end like in the labor, the importance of economy is much more pronounced here than in the Labor Party manifesto. So you can see this very clearly just comparing the colors. If you read the sentence, you can see how they differ substantively. Like, for example, here, for the first time in the nearly half a century, the UK will have its own independent trade policy once we leave the EU. The importance of trade, export, investment. They also are mentioned many times. Business, export. British firms, British economy. So they are really preoccupied on fostering British economy through foreign policy, and not associating foreign policy with other policies such as environmental policies or human rights. Okay, well, this is not it yet. We have a lot of different things. We can select just one issue and see, well, let's see how labor deals with environment. I'm just selecting one issue and see where it appears. So we can see that there are two blocks of environment, one here and another one here, when also appear economy. So let's see what happens when we try to understand the same environment in conservative manifesto. In the conservative manifesto, the environment, the words related to environment appear just in the beginning and in the end, just as a declaration of intentions more than strong policies integrated into their foreign policy strategies as such. So you see that we have just a little present of environment. This is a way of analyze the content of political texts, just selecting one in analyzing. Instead of analyzing everything at once, we can just select one category, one issue, and analyze it and compare the text to see where this issue appears, or more frequent or less frequent, when it disappears, if it is coherently organizing to a section like in the Labor Party movement, or it appears just in the beginning, the end, as a preamble or a conclusion of the manifesto, and so on and so forth. So these kinds of analyses are interesting because when you see these kind of things, you can highlight elements, and you can enhance your comprehension about what is happening. Let's change here and see the term economy. Let's see how economy compares in the two manifestos. I just change here, and I will change here economy. I'll just create a new dictionary with only economic terms, and for the labor, I'll see where the what is export environment. No, well, what's happened? Okay, this is why economy. I did something wrong here. Now it will work. So you can see economy appears here. Violation of human rights, exports, arms exports. You can see UK defense industry, security and exports, innovation in the defense industry, defense manufacturing. Also, the idea here is that economy is related to defense. So climate change and inequality, they try to reduce inequality, global south based on redistribution, reduction of inequality, and so on and so forth. So they are support trade unions, trade agreement to safeguard workers' rights. So when labor are analyzing the economy, they are not making a policy for the British economy as such, for the entrepreneurs or firms. They are they are more preoccupied with laborers, syndicates or unions, or all the defense industry, or the promotion of equality and in other parts of the world as a way of guaranteeing human rights all over the world. So their foreign policy in terms of economy is more related to not expanding the presence of UK economy all over the world, but to facilitate more equality and development in other parts of the world. They are more, we can say, paternalistic in their economic efforts, while conservatives, as we can see, as we will see, they are much more focused on promoting growth to the British economy through foreign policy. Let's do the same here. Oh, here. They are free trade, World Trade Organization, market, support free trade and global growth. They are right to the point. World-class defense industry, slave trade, they are against increased trade and perspective. You can see prosperity. You can see that they have an entire section about economy, while the economic part is dispersed among other measures on the labor manifesto. You can see create new export opportunities, accepting trade deals as part of the EU. They want free to decide how they will make their trade, access to markets, free trade, British trade, business, export markets. You can see that a lot of new words appear here that were not present or had another binding with the main policy when compared to conservatives. So they are here much more preoccupied on how to promote growth in the UK using economy as a tool, while in the labor the idea was economy is subsidiary to other more important policies such as environmental issues and human rights and development in other parts of the world. Okay, so this is something we can do just selecting some words, and this helps us to understand patterns and to understand content. So we can also select the sentences. We can where these these words appear. For example, here I select not just one word or another, but I select the whole sentence, and it helps me just to know exactly where the text is, the context, the context where the text appear. Because if you know, for example, trade. The word trade can be regulated trade, slave trade, unfair trade, free trade. There is a lot of contextual data that if you select only the words you cannot understand. Selecting this overall sentence help you to understand the content and the context where this word appears. So you can read the entire sentence and understand what is the idea behind the mention of this sentence. If it's in favor of one position or another, if are more progressive or conservative, it helps you to separate these things. So I just selected sentences here. These are different strategies. You can use many different strategies. When we analyze anything, as you can see in my other videos, we can use complementary strategies, the strategies that are approach the same problem differently. This is very important in order to gain more ground and understand better a phenomenon. You can use first your own selection, then you can use a dictionary. There are a lot of dictionaries out there. You can find some if you look at Google it, you can find a dictionary of international relations, and you can see all the terms that are associated with security, with diplomacy, with intelligence, etc., and so on and so forth. So you should pay attention to this. But you can use different strategy to gain more leverage and to gain more information about what you are studying. Here, I'm just selecting some strategies that can help you to understand in more depth how each party understand and conceive their conceives their foreign policy. Okay. Um, let's continue here. So I can select the sentences, for example, security, human rights. I can generate a briefing with only the selected sentences on security, for example. So I just take all the other sentences that are not interesting to me, and I just filter them off and generate a new document with all the sentences that I want to, or I would like to read with more care, this is important because in this case we have small documents, but imagine that you are comparing books or comparing large documents, and you are interested only in just a fragment of these books, one page or two, and you need to select information from hundreds of books. So these kinds of automated tools help you a lot. These are not necessary, although they are helpful, they are not necessary for dealing just with two documents. But when you are dealing with a large number of documents, and these documents are readily available online, and you can download them easily, it's much more productive and um, much richer just to use these tools in order to facilitate the work. It never replaces the necessity of reading and interpreting these texts, but they can help you to select, to filter, to find patterns. They can help you to understand better what kind of materials you are using. Okay, so the same for conservatives. Okay, I want I just here can see that, for example, the frequency, how frequent are the issues. So cooperation appears in five sentences, economy in 10 sentences, environment in 18. Security is the most important in labor policies and human rights. The first three are security, environment, and human rights for the labor. Let's look at the conservative. Here the same thing. I want to repeat this. And let's do the table and here. So the economy 18 times and security. The other ones are much less frequent. So we have two main preoccupations, two main concerns for the conservative. That's the economy and security. It's much more straightforward than the other labor. We can visualize this also using a lot of tools that we have. One way of doing this is creating a corpus of text. A corpus is a concept that is a way of organizing all the material, textual material you have. For example, we have a corpus of foreign policy sections of manifestos. We have two parties, labor and conservative. So what I did here is to create this corpus, and I will draw something that we call lexical dispersion plot. Let me zoom this in here. A lexical dispersion plot is a graph, a plot that you can use for identify how concentrated or dispersed words or topics are in a given text. So, as the name itself suggests, how words are dispersed. And we have here, for example, color code the categories. So, security is green, human rights is red, economy is pink, environment is purple, foreign relations is light green, international organization is orange, and corporation is brown. So you can see how frequent this different, how diverse is the in terms of issues is each manifesto, and how propositions are concentrated. You can see that security tends, in both manifestos, security tends to appear in the beginning, although also you can see that the economy appears also first in a conservative manifesto, but mostly we have the division of first security first, economy second. Is the same for both parties, and the labor manifesto is more diverse, and conservative is more dual. You have two main blocks, maybe a third called for international organization. They concentrated here, but you have this division. This helps us to understand, for example, how common, how frequent, how organized are issues on the text. Okay. I will just select the two most important for the conservatives, security and economy, and I'll repeat the exercise just for those, being security blue and economy red. So here we have our example, and we see just focusing on these two elements, security being blue and economy being red. Okay, we can just focus, understand where it appears, how this here it would be the beginning of the text, the first word, and here would be the last word of the text. So you can trace the development of the manifesto of the text, and how many times a term or a term in this dictionary appears on this graph. Another way of doing this is how um, how words appear in context. For example, when you find the term human, how human appears. And then we have this another graph, it's called word tree, and it selects the branches where derived from and after the word human. And so in both manifestos, it appears human rights and human trafficking. There are two, when human appears, it appears as one of these two options, human rights and human trafficking. In what is this? When I click here, human trafficking, everything disappears because there is just one phrase, one sentence where this combination, human trafficking, appears. So if I go to human rights and now I have all this human rights and international law, humanitarian law, program, treaty. So this helps us to understand the occurrence of each term in context with what comes next and what comes after the appearance of this term. Internationalism, for example, then you can read the whole sentence. These all are ways of um, making sense and finding a structure for the text we are analyzing. Okay, so there are tools. I just can, for example, now create a corpus for labor and see how human appears only in labor. So it's a little bit different. You have a lot of phrases, and you can just select and see how human rights, etc., defenders, and I can repeat the exercise, but just for the conservatives. And you can see that the options are much less frequent, and you can see human rights, free trade, is associated with human trafficking, um, human rights abuser, um, uh, being a beacon of freedom and human rights, and will continue to be. And you can give context to each sentence of the manifesto where this term appears. I just selected one party and then another and see how each of them appeared. And you can see first that the issue is much more present in the labor and is much more um, is much more related to a specific measure. International maritime law, for example, Sri Lanka's, they are human rights at every bilateral diplomatic meeting, while for conservatives, human rights are general statements of um, general will. For the Labour Party, it is a set of measures they want to foster and pursue during their government if they were elected. They were not, but they would pursue human rights policies according to their manifesto. Okay, until now I was just scratching the surface with some things, some elements of data exploration. I was considering some graphs, but there are some other techniques we can use. Then and they are called text mining. Some of these, like the lexical dispersion plot, is among them, but I introduce it first. But text mining is a way of doing this kind of automated or semi-automated processes to understand texts and to review patterns. The idea behind these texts, this kind of tools, is to show us patterns, show what are the most frequent words, what terms are related to other terms, and how we can find issues, topics, and important things in the text when we have lots of texts, or when we don't know yet exactly what to look for. So I will recreate the corpus, and I create some analysis of what kinds of words appears with another. So what combination of words appears? A size of two words. So what's the most frequent combinations of words in both manifesto? Human rights, armed forces, foreign policies, export finance, trade agreement, humanitarian law. So with these kinds of collocations, you can analyze what are the most important terms: international development, climate change, of course, global south, Boris Johnson. And you can see that there are some combinations of words that appear frequently. So the idea is that using these kinds of things, you can understand what are the main topics and main ideas behind the text. What are the words that appears the most? UK, trade, labor, international rights, word, human, climate, etc. All the the words we and topics we have already seen, and we can see how they differ by each party. So here I create a graph, a bar graph, for the Labour and for the Conservative Party. What are the most important words for the Labour Party? Labour, international rights, climate, UK, global, human, including support, security, ensure conflict, etc., etc. So for the Conservative, trade is the most important. More than international, world. UK comes before Labour. Labour is the fourth most important word. Here is the third. New, British also reinforcing their national identity. Security, armed forces here, also very important, although security appears just one position above in the Labour Party, but armed forces appear much higher. And if I use the combination, would be even higher position here. So you can see that the other options here are less frequent, but there is also this kind of thing here. Terms appear more paired. You don't have big jumps here. In the case of Conservative Party, they are really a preference for trade. Trade appears a lot, right? Much more than most of the other words. Okay, so you can see the differences. You can tell the differences using this kind of tools. You can also use word clouds. Word clouds is these kinds of graphs that they put the size of the word according to its frequency, the times it appears in text. So you can see that for both parties, international, labor, UK, trade, world rights, human, security, are the most important words. But we can group them by word. There is an algorithm, a nice algorithm that lets us to understand what is the most used term for conservatives and for labor. So labor, you can see that trade is important for conservatives, while climate rights is more important to labor. So you can depict and you can represent these differences using this kind of graphics, like for conservatives, trade is in the center, while for labor, labor and climate are at the center of their discourse in terms of foreign policy. What else we can do? You can do some other interesting things. If we consider, for example, what words appears at the same time or in the same context than other words. What kind of words are related to other words? So we can use some algorithms like this one to create a network of words. So for both parties, includes both parties, we can see support trade, word including armed forces, armed trade, forces word, conflict, and ensure services, export, work, effort. You can see the network, and you can see what kinds of words are highly associated with these central words. The central words for both parties are these, and what kinds of second or secondary ideas come or are related to the major words like trade, right, arms, finance, humanitarian, etc. It's interesting when we separate both parties and create this network for each one of them. I'm doing the same, and this one is the network for the Labor Party, and we can see that support including ensure defense forces, also security is at the center, like support for inequality, for reducing inequality, support health, support sustainable, including distribution, publish equality, inequality, equality, gender, families, and here more with development, strategy, export, humanitarian aid. So you have different sections, and you can see how these subjects are related, what terms are more central in the discourse. These are the center, and these are the immediately related network, and these are more peripheral in the discourse because they are more loosely less tight than related to this core network. Let's see what happens to the conservative network. You have here trade, armed forces, British word are in the center of discourse. You have some a group of elements that are continuous support free, that is related to free world, free trade, armed forces, and other concepts that are less related to the core, but they have some core ideas that free trade, armed forces, and support the increased presence of British in the global world. It will be the core purpose of the Conservative Party. So looking at this data and these informations, you can see a lot of how tight is the discourse of each party and what are the core associations between concepts in this discourse. Another, and this is the final exercise we do, another element that is useful for this kind of analysis is I don't know what the topics are, and I need to find or at least explore a little bit what kind of things appear. So you have some one aspect of natural language processing called topic modeling. Is an automated way, some mathematical models that are applied to the text to see what words appears that are similar and how they can be grouped together. I use one example here in order to create some clusters, some groups of words. Here I have this window, and this window draw, let me just put here a little bit higher, draw 10 clusters to me, 10 groups of words that I can use to understand the potential issues that are on these texts. You can hear human rights, Yemen, export abuse, arm, conflict, solution, Middle East, law, military, peace, terror, institution, influence, project, effect, injustice, role of Britain's diplomatic, and you can see climate change, trade, promotion, deal, free trade, defense industry, veterans, armed forces, and so on and so forth. So here we have a lot of different groups of words. Each group may be named, like for here, for example, I would say human rights, and here international conflicts, here institutions, here colonialism, British colonialism, or British foreign policy, here climate change and development, here trade, here also trade and economy. So here defense, support for defense industry, here support for veterans, and here others like NHS systems, for example, that appears on the conservative manifesto. You can see that some of them are redundant. For example, here we have two clusters talking about trade. So I analyzed this and I found that 5 clusters would be best for describing these kinds of things. This here could be human rights issue, human rights all over the world. Here, basically, climate change and security. This would be trade. Here would be armed forces, industry, and forces security. All the measures related to defense industry, armed forces payments, and rights for their veterans and families. And here other factors related to some residual topics that appear. So I have 5 big issues that appears in the text. So human rights, climate change and diplomacy, trade, armed forces, and defense industry, and other. So these 5 topics help me to systematize both manifestos in 5 big issues that appear. Okay. So I can generate the same graph here, just considering this, and I can analyze now. I create this, I give name, for example, first human rights, second environment and security, third trade, industry and assistance for the armed forces, and 5 others. So I just will see what is the proportion of each one of these clusters in each party. So the last exercise here is to see how each one of these clusters of these topics, in this case are topics, they appear in each of the parties. This is the Conservative Party and this is the Labour Party. So environment, you can see that environment is much more pronounced in Labour than in Conservative, as well as human rights. But when it comes to trade and industry and assistance, is the reverse. The assistance to the armed forces, families and veterans, and armed forces industry are much more pronounced, although also important in the labor, are much more pronounced in conservative. And trade is a key issue that accounts for almost half of the manifesto in terms of frequency in all the topics that we observed so far. So this is an example of text mining. We use here both a lot of different tools to extract a lot of meaning and new forms of identifying similarities and difference from texts. I just use here foreign policy text because I thought it was very interesting to you as students of global studies. But you can use any kind of text from tweets or comments in a social media platform to entire documents in any language. I use English because it's our working language, but we can use many other languages um, to make this kind of analysis. The idea is you have a lot of tools, a lot of different ways of analyzing the same, and you can complement your reading of the text of your gut, of your intuition, with other kinds of tools that are easy to implement, are easy to do, and help you a lot when you are trying to understand or identifying patterns among the data you have when you have texts. So this is it, and I hope you enjoy it. Bye.